Good day, my friend. I want to talk to you today about something that can transform your life, changing the way you look at things. See, life isn't about what happens to us. It's about how we choose to see it. Two people can go through the same situation. One sees defeat, the other sees an opportunity. One gives up, the other grows stronger. It's all about perspective. Maybe you've been praying, working hard, believing, but nothing seems to be changing. The doors aren't opening. The promotion isn't coming. The situation isn't turning around. But let me remind you, sometimes before the situation changes, you have to change. The way you see your challenges, your setbacks, your struggles. They are not there to defeat you. They are there to prepare you, to grow you, to strengthen you. The moment you shift your perspective, your situation may not change immediately, but your peace will, your joy will, your faith will, and before long, your breakthrough will come. When you see struggles, don't see them as obstacles, see them as stepping stones. When you face rejection, don't take it as defeat, take it as redirection. God wouldn't have allowed it if it wasn't leading you to something greater. So today I challenge you, change the way you look at things. Stop looking at what you lost and start seeing what's ahead. Stop focusing on what's against you and start seeing who is for you. Because when you shift your perspective, your whole life will shift with it. The way you see the world determines the kind of life you will live. Your thoughts, your mindset, and your perspective act as a filter through which you interpret everything that happens to you. Two people can go through the same situation. One sees it as an opportunity, the other sees it as a disaster. But the issue is the same for the other. There's an opportunity, the other sees it as a disaster. The situation didn't change, but their perspective did, and that made all the difference. If you want to live a life filled with joy, peace, and victory, you must first learn to see things in the right way. Think about a storm. To one person, a storm is nothing but destruction and chaos. It knocks down trees, floods roads, and brings darkness. But to another person, that same storm waters the earth, fills the rivers, and brings much needed rain to the land. The storm is the same, but the way it is perceived determines whether it is seen as a blessing or a burden. Your life is no different. The things you go through may be challenging, but if you choose to see them in the right way, they can become stepping stones instead of stumbling blocks. Take, for example, a delay in your plans. You prayed for that promotion, that open door, that breakthrough, but it hasn't come yet. You could get frustrated, complain, and think nothing ever works out for me. Or you could choose a different perspective and say, this delay is not a denial, it's a setup for something greater. The way you see it will affect how you respond. If you choose to stay in faith, to keep believing, and to keep a good attitude, you will position yourself for greater blessings. The same applies to people. Someone might mistreat you, speak against you, or try to bring you down. You could take offense, hold on to bitterness, and let it ruin your day. Or you could say, they don't control my destiny. I'm not going to let their negativity steal my joy. Your perspective allows you to rise above the situation rather than be weighed down by it. When you shift your focus, you take back control of your emotions and your peace. Even failure is a matter of perspective. One person fails and gives up, believing they're not good enough. Another person fails and sees it as a lesson, a stepping stone towards success. They learn from it, grow from it, and come back stronger. The greatest achievers in history were not people who never failed, but people who refused to let failure define them. It wasn't their circumstances that made them great, it was the way they saw their circumstances. What you focus on expands. If you constantly focus on what's wrong, what's missing, and what didn't go your way, that's all you'll see. But if you start focusing on what's good, what's possible, and what God is doing behind the scenes, you'll begin to see life differently. This is why gratitude is so powerful. When you start thanking God for what you have, you start seeing even more things to be grateful for. Your perspective affects your relationships. If you always expect people to hurt you, betray you, or disappoint you, that's what you'll attract. But if you expect kindness, love, and good friendships, you will begin to see them more and more in your life. What you believe about people shapes your interactions with them. When you expect the best in others, you bring out the best in them. Even in the darkest moments, there is always something good to see. When Joseph was thrown into a pit by his brothers, he could have become bitter. He could have thought, my life is over. But instead, he kept his faith, kept his perspective, right? And eventually, he rose to power in Egypt, saving millions. What seemed like a terrible situation was actually setting him up for his destiny. The same is true for you. What looks like a setback could be a setup for something greater. God has given you the power to choose how you see your life. You can see obstacles or opportunities, problems or possibilities, setbacks or setups. The choice is yours. Your perspective determines your attitude, your emotions, and your future. That's why the scripture says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. When you change your mind, you change your life. So I encourage you today, pay attention to your perspective. Are you looking at life through the lens of faith, gratitude, and victory? Or are you seeing it through fear, doubt, and defeat? Remember, your life will always move in the direction of your dominant thoughts. Choose to see the good and you will experience more good. Choose to see the opportunity and doors will open. Choose to see life the way God sees it, and you will walk in the fullness of his blessings. So often we pray for our circumstances to improve. We ask for the promotion, the breakthrough, the healing, the relationship to be restored. And while God is working behind the scenes, sometimes he is waiting for us to change first. See, your situation doesn't define you. Your mindset, your attitude, and your faith do. If you want to step into something greater, the change has to start within you. Think about the Israelites in the wilderness. They were set free from slavery in Egypt, yet they still had a slave mentality. They complained, they doubted, they focused on the problems instead of the promise. And because of that, what should have been an 11-day journey took 40 years. Their location changed, but their mindset didn't, so they remained stuck. The same is true for us. If we don't change on the inside, we'll keep repeating the same struggles, the same frustrations, the same disappointments. You may be asking God for a new level, but are you preparing for it? You want a better job, but are you giving your best where you are? You want a stronger relationship, but are you working on yourself? You want a financial breakthrough, but are you managing what you already have wisely? God doesn't promote us based on our desires. He promotes us when we are ready. Many times we think the problem is external. If only my boss saw my potential. If only this person treated me better. If only I had more resources. But the truth is, the change we need most is internal. It's not about waiting for others to recognize us. It's about developing the character, discipline, and faith that will sustain us at the next level. Look at Joseph before he ruled Egypt. He went through years of trials. He was betrayed, falsely accused, thrown into prison. But instead of becoming bitter, he kept his faith, kept his integrity, and kept growing. His circumstances didn't change overnight, but he changed. He developed wisdom, leadership, and resilience. And when the time was right, God elevated him. The same principle applies to us. If we keep complaining about what we don't have, we're not ready for more. If we stay stuck in bitterness over what didn't work out, we're not ready for something better. But when we shift our mindset, when we say, God, I trust you in this season. I will be faithful where I am. I will keep growing, keep believing, keep preparing. That's when things start to change. Maybe you've been in a season of waiting. You've been praying, hoping, believing, but nothing seems to shift. Don't get discouraged. Get prepared. If you're believing for a new opportunity, start developing new skills. If you're waiting for a relationship, start becoming the kind of person you want to attract. If you're expecting a breakthrough, start positioning yourself for it. Your situation is not the problem. Your mindset is the key. When you start thinking differently, speaking differently, and believing differently, your environment will eventually align with it. You don't have to wait for the circumstances to change before you walk in victory. You can choose to live with joy, peace, and confidence right now. So today, make the decision. Before my situation changes, I will change. I will grow, I will trust, I will prepare. And when the time is right, God will open the doors that no man can shut. The breakthrough isn't just coming, it's already in motion. Stay faithful, stay expectant, and watch what happens. We all face challenges in life. Unexpected setbacks, disappointments, and struggles that seem unfair. It's easy to think, why is this happening to me? Why am I facing so many difficulties? But what if I told you that every challenge you face is not there to stop you, it's there to prepare you? See, God never allows a challenge in your life unless it has a greater purpose. What looks like an obstacle is actually a stepping stone to your destiny. The very thing that seems like it's holding you back is actually setting you up for something greater. You may not see it now, but if you keep the right perspective, one day you'll look back and realize that the challenges you faced were the very things that made you stronger, wiser, and more equipped for your purpose. Think about David. Before he became king, he was just a shepherd boy, overlooked and underestimated. But he faced a challenge, a giant named Goliath. That battle wasn't meant to defeat him. It was meant to promote him. If he had never faced Goliath, he would have never stepped into his destiny. The very challenge that looked like an obstacle was actually a doorway to his purpose. Maybe right now you're facing a challenge in your finances, in your career, in your relationships. You might be thinking, this is too hard, I don't see a way out. But could it be that this challenge is actually pushing you towards something greater? Could it be that this difficulty is not meant to break you, but to build you? God is using this season to stretch you, to develop you, to take you to the next level. If life were always easy, we wouldn't grow. Strength is built through resistance. If you never faced any difficulties, you wouldn't develop perseverance, patience, or faith. It's in the challenges that we learn to trust God. It's in the trials that we discover who we really are. Every successful person you admire has faced obstacles, but they chose to see them as stepping stones rather than roadblocks. Joseph was betrayed by his brothers, thrown into a pit, and sold into slavery. That seemed like the end of the story. But every challenge he faced was actually leading him closer to his destiny. If he hadn't been sold into slavery, he wouldn't have ended up in Egypt. If he hadn't been falsely accused, he wouldn't have been placed in prison. And if he hadn't been in prison, he wouldn't have met the person who would connect him to Pharaoh. What seemed like obstacles were actually steps leading him to his purpose. The same is true for you. The difficulties you're facing today are not random. They are strengthening you, refining you, and positioning you for something greater. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Start asking, what is this teaching me? How is this preparing me for the next level? When you go through a challenge, don't get discouraged, get excited. That challenge is a sign that something greater is coming. The enemy wouldn't be fighting you so hard if there weren't something incredible on the other side. You're closer than you think to your breakthrough, so don't shrink back when challenges come. Don't run away from difficulties. Instead, step forward with confidence, knowing that this is not here to stop you, it's here to prepare you. Every challenge is a stepping stone. Every battle is leading you toward victory. God is working all things together for your good. Stay strong, stay faithful, and keep moving forward. Rejection is one of the hardest things we face in life. You gave your best, but the door still closed. You put your heart into that relationship, but they walked away. You applied for the job, but they chose someone else. It's easy to feel discouraged, to think, I wasn't good enough. Maybe I'll never get another opportunity. But let me remind you today, rejection is not the end. It's not defeat. It's simply redirection. What you see as rejection is often God's way of guiding you toward something better. You may not understand it now, but one day you'll look back and realize that what seemed like a setback was actually a setup for something greater. That closed door wasn't there to stop you. It was there to protect you, to push you into the right place, to lead you toward your true destiny. Think about Joseph. He was rejected by his own brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. At any moment, he could have given up, believing that life had been unfair to him. But what Joseph didn't see was that every rejection was actually redirection. If his brothers hadn't rejected him, he wouldn't have ended up in Egypt. If he hadn't been falsely accused, he wouldn't have been placed in the prison where he met the person who would later introduce him to Pharaoh. Every closed door was leading him to the palace. Maybe you've been praying for an opportunity, but it hasn't worked out. You've been believing for a relationship, but it fell apart. Instead of getting discouraged, start saying, God, I trust that this rejection is your protection. I believe you are leading me to something better. Rejection is not a sign of failure. It's a sign that you are being repositioned. Sometimes what you want is too small compared to what God has in store for you. You're believing for something good, but He has something great. You're asking for what's comfortable, but He's preparing you for what's extraordinary. If He allowed that door to close, trust that it's because He has something better in mind. Look at David. He wanted to build the temple for God, but God said, no, that's not your assignment. Instead of being discouraged, David accepted it and prepared the way for his son, Solomon, to build it. Sometimes rejection happens because the opportunity wasn't meant for you. It was meant for someone else. And that's okay, because God still has something amazing planned for your life. When people reject you, don't take it personally. Not everyone is supposed to walk with you into your destiny. Some people are only part of your story for a season. If they walked away, let them go. If they said no, don't beg them to say yes. If they don't see your value, don't waste time trying to prove yourself. The right people, the right opportunities, and the right doors will open at the right time. One day you'll look back at every rejection and say, thank you, God, for not letting me settle. Thank you for leading me to something better. Thank you for protecting me from things I thought I wanted but weren't meant for me. So don't let rejection make you feel like a failure. It's not the end of the road. It's just a detour. Trust that God is leading you to something greater. Keep believing, keep moving forward, and one day you'll see how every no was actually making room for the right yes. There are moments in life when we face things that don't make sense, unexpected losses, disappointments, delays, and struggles that leave us wondering, why did this happen? If God loves me, why did He allow this? It's easy to feel discouraged, to think that life is unfair, that somehow you've been forgotten. But let me remind you today, God wouldn't allow something in your life unless it had a purpose. You may not see it right now, but God is always working behind the scenes. What looks like a setback is actually a setup. What feels like the end is often the beginning of something greater. God doesn't make mistakes. If He allowed it, there's a reason. It may not be clear in the moment, but one day you'll look back and understand why it had to happen the way it did. Think about Job. He was a good man, faithful and upright, yet he lost everything. His wealth, his health, even his family. He could have become bitter, asking God, why me? But what Job didn't realize was that his story wasn't over. God was using his trial to test his faith, to build his character, and to prepare him for double blessings. In the end, Job received twice as much as he had before. What looked like devastation was actually a setup for restoration. Maybe you've faced a closed door, a painful breakup, or a financial hardship. It doesn't make sense and you don't understand why. But what if God is using this situation to develop you, to stretch your faith, to make you stronger? Instead of asking, why did this happen? Start asking, God, what are you teaching me? How is this preparing me for what's next? God is strategic. He doesn't allow things at random. There is purpose in your pain, meaning in your struggle, and growth in your difficulties. What you're facing today is not meant to destroy you, it's meant to refine you. Just like gold is purified in the fire, sometimes we have to go through challenges to become who we were created to be. Look at Joseph. He was betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, and falsely accused. For years it seemed like everything was against him. But what Joseph didn't realize was that each hardship was positioning him for his destiny. If he had never been thrown into the pit, he wouldn't have ended up in Egypt. If he had never been falsely accused, he wouldn't have met the right people in prison. And if he hadn't been in prison, he wouldn't have been elevated to rule over Egypt. What looked like misfortune was actually divine positioning. The same is true for you. You may not see it now, but everything you've been through is leading you somewhere greater. The doors that closed, the people who walked away, the opportunities that didn't work out, they weren't accidents. They were part of a bigger plan. God is using everything, the good, the bad, and the unfair, to bring you into your purpose. Romans 8:28 says, God works all things together for good for those who love Him. Not some things, not just the good things, all things. That means your mistakes, your failures, your heartbreaks. God can take what was meant for harm and turn it around for your good. So instead of getting discouraged, trust that there is purpose in what you're going through. If God allowed it, He has a reason. He's not trying to hurt you. He's preparing you. He's shaping you for something greater. Your story isn't over. Keep the faith. Keep moving forward. And one day you'll look back and realize that every challenge, every tear, every closed door was all part of a beautiful divine plan. One of the greatest challenges in life is learning how to let go of the past. We've all been through things that hurt us. Failures, disappointments, betrayals, and missed opportunities. And if we're not careful, we can spend so much time looking back that we miss what's ahead. But here's the truth. You can't step into the future God has for you while still holding on to the past. It's easy to dwell on what didn't work out, that relationship that ended, the job you didn't get, the mistake you made. Your mind keeps replaying it, wondering what could have been different. But living in the past won't change anything. All it does is rob you of the joy and purpose that's waiting for you in the future. Think about a runner in a race. If they keep looking over their shoulder, worrying about what's behind them, they'll slow down, they'll lose focus, and before they know it, they've fallen behind. That's why the Apostle Paul said in Philippians 3:13, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on toward the goal. He knew that the only way to reach his destiny was to stop looking back and start moving forward. Maybe you've been stuck in regret. You keep thinking about the opportunity you missed, the time you wasted, the way things should have been different. But can I tell you something? God is not limited by your past. He's not saying, well, you messed up, so now I can't bless you. No, God is a God of new beginnings. He can restore what was lost. He can redeem what was broken. But you have to make the choice to let go and move forward. Lot's wife is a powerful example of what happens when we hold on to the past. In Genesis 19, God was rescuing Lot's family from destruction. He told them, don't look back. But Lot's wife couldn't help herself. She turned around, longing for what was behind her. And in that moment, she lost her future. She turned into a pillar of salt. How many of us are frozen in place because we can't let go of what's behind us? We're stuck in past mistakes, past relationships, past disappointments. But as long as we're looking back, we can't move forward. God is saying, today, I have something better ahead of you. Stop looking back. Stop dwelling on the past. Press forward into the new things I have for you. Isaiah 43:18-19 says, forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? Notice God doesn't say he might do a new thing. He says he is already doing it. Right now, he's lining up new opportunities, new relationships, new blessings. But you'll never see them if you're too focused on yesterday. Maybe you've been holding on to bitterness from what someone did to you. They hurt you, they betrayed you, and you can't stop thinking about it. But let me tell you, holding on to the hurt is only keeping you stuck. When you release it, when you forgive, when you say, God, I trust you to make it right, that's when you'll feel peace again. That's when you'll be free to move forward. Or maybe you've been replaying your failures. You made mistakes and now shame and regret are keeping you from believing in yourself. But here's the good news. God's mercy is new every morning. He's not focused on your past. So why should you be? Get up, dust yourself off, and start believing in the future he has for you. Today, make the decision. I'm done looking back. I'm letting go of the past. And I'm stepping into my future. Because what God has ahead of you is so much greater than anything you left behind. Life will always present challenges, situations that seem impossible, obstacles that feel too big, and dreams that appear out of reach. In those moments, it's easy to think, this is just the way things are. Nothing will ever change. But let me remind you today, your faith has the power to shift your circumstances. See, faith is not just believing when things are going well. Faith is believing even when everything around you says there's no way. It's standing firm when the odds are against you. It's trusting that God is working even when you can't see it. Faith is the key that unlocks doors, moves mountains, and turns impossibilities into realities. Think about the woman with the issue of blood in Mark 5, Dalio. She had suffered for 12 years. Doctors couldn't help her. Nothing seemed to work. But she didn't give up. When she heard that Jesus was coming, she said, if I can just touch the hem of his garment, I will be healed. That was faith. She didn't say, maybe I'll be healed. She declared, I will be healed. And the moment she touched him, her faith shifted, her circumstance, she was made whole. Maybe you're facing a financial struggle, a health issue, or a broken relationship. You've done everything you can and it still looks impossible. But let me tell you, one touch of God's favor can change everything. One moment of faith can open a door you never expected. One act of trust can bring the breakthrough you've been waiting for. Faith is not about what you see. It's about what you believe. Look at Abraham. God told him he would be the father of many nations, yet he and Sarah were old and had no children. Everything in the natural said it was impossible. But Romans 4:18 says, against all hope, Abraham in hope believed. He didn't waver in his faith, and because of that, he received what God promised. His faith shifted his circumstances. What about you? Are you letting your circumstances dictate your faith, or is your faith dictating your circumstances? Are you speaking defeat, or are you declaring victory? Are you saying, I'll never get well, I'll never get out of debt, I'll never see my dreams come to pass? Or are you saying, God is still in control, I am more than a conqueror, I know he will make a way where there seems to be no way? The enemy wants you to focus on how big the problem is, but God wants you to focus on how big he is. He is greater than the sickness, greater than the financial difficulty, greater than the obstacle in front of you. But you have to activate your faith. You have to believe before you see it. In Matthew 17:20, Jesus said, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Notice, he didn't say wait for the mountain to move. He said speak to it. That means you have to start declaring what you believe. Speak life over your situation. Speak healing over your body. Speak breakthrough over your finances. Speak restoration over your family. Faith is not passive, it's active. When Peter saw Jesus walking on the water, he didn't just sit in the boat and hope. He took action. He stepped out, and as long as he kept his eyes on Jesus, he walked on water. But the moment he looked at the waves, he started to sink. That's what happens when we focus on our problems instead of God's promises. So today I want to encourage you, shift your focus back to faith. Stop speaking defeat. Stop agreeing with the negative. Start declaring God's promises. Your faith has the power to shift your circumstances. Keep believing, keep trusting, and want God do what only he can do. Life has a way of magnifying our problems. If we're not careful, we can get so caught up in what's wrong that we miss what's right. We focus on what we don't have, who walked away, what didn't work out, and before we know it, we're living in frustration, disappointment, and discouragement. But can I tell you something? Gratitude has the power to shift your entire perspective. Gratitude doesn't change your circumstances. It changes the way you see them. When you start thanking God for what you do have, instead of focusing on what you don't, something shifts. Your vision changes. You stop seeing obstacles and you start seeing opportunities. You stop seeing lack and you start seeing God's provision. You stop seeing what's wrong and you start seeing what's right. Gratitude is like a lens. It filters out the negativity and brings the goodness of God into focus. Think about Paul and Silas in Acts 16. They were thrown into prison, not for doing something wrong, but for preaching the gospel. They could have been bitter. They could have complained, God, we're serving you, and this is what we get. But instead of focusing on their chains, they started praising. They started singing. And do you know what happened? At midnight, their prison doors flew open. The praise led to their breakthrough. Gratitude didn't just change their vision, it changed their situation. Maybe you're in a season where things aren't going the way you expected. The promotion hasn't come. The relationship ended. The healing hasn't manifested yet. It's easy to focus on what's wrong, but what if you started looking at what's right? What if instead of saying, I have so many problems, you started saying, God, I may not be where I want to be, but I thank you that I'm not where I used to be. See, gratitude is not about having everything perfect. It's about choosing to see the good even in the midst of the bad. It's about saying, Lord, I may not understand everything, but I trust you. I may not have everything I want, but I thank you for what I do have. Jesus showed us the power of gratitude before performing one of his greatest miracles. In John 6, there was a crowd of over 5,000 hungry people, and all they had was 5 loaves and 2 fish. The disciples looked at what was missing. They said, it's not enough. But Jesus looked at what was there, and he gave thanks. The moment he blessed the small portion, it multiplied. Gratitude took lack and turned it into abundance. What are you magnifying in your life? Are you magnifying the problem, or are you magnifying the promise? Are you focusing on what's missing, or are you thanking God for what's already in your hands? Psalm 104 says, enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Notice, gratitude is the key that unlocks the door to God's presence. When you give thanks, you step into a new realm of favor, a new level of joy, a new dimension of peace. The enemy wants you to focus on what's not working. He wants you to complain, to stay discouraged, to feel like nothing will ever change. But the moment you shift to gratitude, his plan is defeated. Why? Because gratitude and negativity cannot exist in the same space. When you start thanking God, fear has to leave. When you start praising, worry has to go. When you focus on the good, the bad starts to lose its power over you. Today I challenge you, change your vision by changing your attitude. Wake up and thank God for a new day. Thank Him for the breath in your lungs, for the people in your life, for the opportunities ahead of you. Because when you live with a heart of gratitude, you won't just see things differently. You'll start to see God move in ways you never imagined. There are moments in life when you feel like you're all by yourself. You're doing the right thing, but nothing is changing. You're praying, believing, staying faithful, but the situation still looks the same. Maybe you're facing a health challenge, a financial struggle, or a broken relationship, and it seems like God is silent. But let me remind you today, just because you don't see anything happening doesn't mean God isn't working. Just because you don't hear His voice doesn't mean He's not moving. Behind the scenes, in the places you can't see, God is arranging things in your favor. Think about the story of Esther. She was just an ordinary Jewish girl living in a foreign land, never imagining that she would one day become queen. But behind the scenes, God was orchestrating everything, removing Vashti, putting Esther in the palace, and setting the stage for her to save an entire nation. She didn't see it while it was happening, but God was working. Maybe today, you feel stuck. You're waiting for a breakthrough and it seems like nothing is moving. But just because you can't see the progress doesn't mean it's not happening. A seed doesn't grow the moment you plant it. It takes time. The roots are growing underground before you ever see the first sprout. In the same way, God is growing things beneath the surface of your life. Look at Joseph. He had a dream of greatness, but instead of promotion, he faced betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment. For years, it looked like nothing was happening, but behind the scenes, God was positioning him, preparing him, and working everything together for his good. And in one day, he went from the prison to the palace, from being forgotten to being second in command over all of Egypt. What if your breakthrough is closer than you think? What if right now, God is setting up divine connections, opening the right doors, and preparing you for the opportunity of a lifetime? Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not on the way. Isaiah 45:15 says, "Truly you are a God who hides Himself." That means God doesn't always make His moves obvious. He works behind the scenes, in hidden places, in ways we don't always understand. Your job is not to figure out how, it's to trust that He is working. When the Israelites were trapped between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army, they thought it was over. But what they couldn't see was that God had already made a way of escape. The wind was blowing all night, parting the sea before they ever saw the first wave move. God was working before they even realized it. Maybe you're in a season of waiting. You've been praying for something, believing for a breakthrough, and you feel like nothing is happening. But don't be discouraged. God is setting things in motion. He's working in ways beyond your understanding. Your story isn't over. Your miracle is already in progress. So instead of worrying, start thanking Him in advance. Instead of feeling alone, remind yourself that God is with you, working behind the scenes. Your time is coming. Your breakthrough is on the way. Keep trusting, keep believing, and watch how He brings it all together in ways you never expected. So often we pray for God to change our situation. We ask Him to remove the difficulty, open the door, or make things easier. But what if the real breakthrough doesn't come from a change in your circumstances, but from a change in your perspective? See, how you look at a situation determines how you experience it. Two people can go through the same challenge. One comes out stronger and the other comes out bitter. The difference? Perspective. One sees it as a setback, the other sees it as a setup. One sees it as a burden, the other sees it as a blessing in disguise. A shift in perspective leads to a shift in life. Think about David. When he saw Goliath, he could have said, "That giant's too big. There's no way I can defeat him." That's what everyone else was saying. But David had a different perspective. He looked at Goliath and said, "He's so big, I can't miss." His faith gave him the right perspective, and that perspective led him to victory. Maybe today you're looking at your situation the wrong way. You're thinking, this problem is too big. I'll never get out of debt. My dreams will never come to pass. But what if instead you started saying, this challenge is an opportunity. This obstacle is a stepping stone. This difficulty is preparing me for something greater. The Israelites had the wrong perspective when they were about to enter the promised land. 12 spies went to check it out. 10 came back saying, the land is great, but the giants are too big. We don't stand a chance. But Joshua and Caleb had a different perspective. They said, yes, the giants are big, but our God is bigger. The ones who saw themselves as victims never entered the land, but the ones who saw themselves as victorious walked right into their destiny. How you see yourself matters. If you see yourself as weak, defeated, and unable, then you'll live that way. But when you see yourself as strong, capable, and victorious, you'll start to walk in confidence. Proverbs 23:7 says, "As a man thinks in his heart, so is he." That means your life will follow your thoughts. If you want to change your life, change how you think. Paul understood this principle. He was imprisoned for preaching the gospel, locked up in chains, yet he didn't see himself as a victim. He wrote in Philippians 1:12, "What has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel." In other words, I'm not stuck, I'm positioned. That's perspective. Instead of focusing on the problem, he focused on the purpose. And because of that, he walked in joy, even in the middle of difficulty. Maybe today your situation isn't changing because God is waiting for you to change how you see it. Instead of saying, "Why is this happening to me?" start saying, "What is this teaching me?" Instead of saying, "This is unfair," start saying, "God is using this for my good." Instead of saying, "This problem is too much," start saying, "God is preparing me for something greater." A shift in perspective leads to a shift in life. When you stop seeing obstacles and start seeing opportunities, your faith rises. When you stop seeing setbacks and start seeing setups, doors begin to open. God is not holding you back. Your perspective might be. Today, I challenge you to start seeing things differently. Ask God to give you fresh eyes. Ask Him to show you the blessing in the battle, the purpose in the pain, in the lesson, in the difficulty. Because when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. And when your perspective shifts, your life will shift too. My friend, you may not be able to control everything that happens to you, but you can control how you see it. You can choose to focus on what's wrong, or you can choose to focus on what God is doing through it. You can see obstacles, or you can see opportunities. You can see yourself as defeated, or you can see yourself as victorious. The choice is yours. Remember, your perspective shapes your reality. When you start looking at challenges as stepping stones, when you start seeing delays as divine preparation, when you start recognizing that what the enemy meant for harm, God is turning for good, everything begins to shift. So today, make the decision to see your situation with eyes of faith. Don't let fear, worry, or doubt cloud your vision. Instead, declare God is in control. He is working all things together for my good. This challenge is not happening to me, it's happening for me. And as you change your perspective, watch how your life begins to shift. Doors will open, opportunities will come, and what once looked like an obstacle will become a testimony of God's faithfulness. Keep believing, keep trusting, and keep seeing through the eyes of faith. Because your best days are still ahead.